Lawyers of Reddit, what is the worst advice you've seen on r/legaladvice? I'm a lawyer and the biggest mistake I see people make is assuming the law is the same everywhere. There is a reason we need to be licensed in every state to practice there. Furthermore, if it's not your specific area of expertise, a general knowledge of the law is probably not enough. In a thread asking about the legality of physically assaulting people who don't wear masks in public, big surprise. It's still assault. The general consensus was feeling strongly enough about something means laws don't matter. I tend to notice it's common on Reddit to have this weird, psychotic power fantasy going on where you can respond to minor rudeness with immediate and overwhelming violence and be applauded for it while doing so. A lot of advice in r/legaladvice from not a lawyer type seems to advocate blatantly illegal and often violent behavior in reprisal to some pretty minor slights. The mod team is pretty good at taking down these types of comments, but you still see a lot of them. For people unaware, there are no qualifications to be a contributor on r/legaladvice. So you could be getting responses from actual qualified lawyers, or it could be a 15 years old repeating garbage they heard on the internet. The only half decent advice I've ever seen come from that sub was what kind of lawyer you need to look for. It's safest to assume that everyone else is a cop or a maroon. It was regarding a non-compete or some kind of employment contract. All of the advice in the thread, including from quality contributor flared posters, was saying looks like you're stuck. It's a contract and you agreed to it. Consider it a life lesson. With 2 minutes of research I found an appellate case directly on point from the relevant jurisdiction saying employers can't enforce this contractual clause because it's against public policy, meaning that everyone else giving advice in the thread was correct generally, but 100% wrong for the opus. Lexis/Westlaw searches, the way lawyers research the law, are obscenely expensive. So I don't expect anyone in r/legaladvice to be doing them out of pocket to help internet randos. But I found it with Google. Either way, if you're posting there giving advice half-cocked, not knowing the full facts or law, I feel like you're violating your ethical obligations as an attorney. Aren't they also known for banging actual lawyers when they correct people? That seems counterintuitive for what the sub should be for. I'm a lawyer. So much of it is straight up garbage. It's pretty clearly full of folks googling away. The best answers are often downvoted lol. I followed legaladvice for a few days or something and bounced as fast as possible. Don't rely on Reddit if you need advice. Bingo. What's offered on r/legaladvice is usually not legal nor advice. It's ridiculous. I used to think all advice from that subreddit was legit until now. More upvotes doesn't mean it's correct. I'm not a lawyer, but I really enjoyed the person talking about my state's Great Ponds law. The question was asking what to do about people trespassing on Ops boat ramp at their summer cabin. According this poster, the Great Ponds law says there needs to be access, so therefore Op is shit out of luck. In reality, the law says that the town must provide public access to lakes or ponds over a certain size. Not that you can just walk through anybody's property to get there. There are loads of people that are not familiar with the, assuming, USA's territorial culture of protecting private property. It seems they have no concept of a private property. There are some cultures where outdoor space is considered open use, within reason. But what struck me about that comment was that they were aware of such a specific law, yet didn't seem to have any idea what it actually means. It's pretty explicit that it means a designated area of public access. In my opinion, there are only 3 actual pieces of advice from that sub. 1. Call the police. 2. Get a lawyer. 3. You're fucked. And all 3 will be offered at the wrong time for the wrong topics. My general issue with their answers is that they are usually way too straightforward and definitive. Few legal questions have straightforward answers or what lawyers call bright line rules. There's a reason attorneys always use words like it depends and a few caveats in their answers. They are not trying to be frustrating. They are trying to convey that how it plays out is complicated and far from a certainty. It's more like predicting the weather. Anybody who can give you a straightforward, simple answer to a legal question probably thinks they know a lot more than they really do. It's like people who think they're legal experts because they've read the Constitution a few times and keep one in their pocket. They'll make constitutional arguments based solely on their personal, very literal interpretation of the applicable language in the Constitution and think that's the end of the matter. Like take the First Amendment's free speech provision. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. That's a lot more vague of a statement than it might seem at first. How do you define speech? Does it literally have to be spoken words? Or can it cover actions expressing an opinion? What about speech specifically tailored to get people hurt? Like the classic example of yelling fire in a crowded theater? Surely we can't just allow people to say whatever they want in all situations. Full stop. And what exactly does it mean to abridge that right anyways? Does it have to be a total ban on their ability to say it? Or could something that simply discourages it in a specific situation be considered an abridgment? In defining these words, do we interpret them according to a modern dictionary definition, or what the words would have meant at the time the amendment was drafted? What if the word has multiple definitions? Should we consider contemporaneous historical documents that speak to the legislative intent of the law's drafters? Or is that irrelevant? Answering questions like those are where case law and precedent comes in. The Constitution doesn't exist in a void. It has 200 years of Supreme Court precedent that also has to be considered, and some cases will actually go back even further to the English common law. But usually the precedent isn't a perfect one-for-one analogy with specific facts of the case at hand. Arguments must be made as to why the holding a given case should or should not apply, or whether a completely new rule is needed, and all that is really just scratching the surface of the complexity of these things. There's a reason Supreme Court opinions on stuff like these will frequently be dozens or even hundreds of pages long. That's not to say there don't exist legal questions with simple, straightforward answers. But if you're getting a lot of those, someone is probably full of shit. This wall of text has some nuance. Good on ya. I'm not a lawyer, but I used to browse /r/legaladvice a year or two ago. There was a girl who was looking for options to prevent her parents from taking her back to the ancestral third world country for a year for school or something. The post was chock full of red flags. From the context it seemed pretty likely that the actual reason was far more sinister. I don't remember the specifics, but it seemed likely she would be married off or suffer FGM, and in any case, would not be returning to the USA at any point. As I recall, she seemed reluctant to leave her friends for a year and didn't look forward to the trip, but she seemed oblivious that there might be something worse in store. Specifics aside, everyone was justifiably scared for her. Nobody had any particularly useful legal advice, because it turns out there's not really anything illegal about leaving the country with your minor/dependent child with a good cover story, and her few preemptive legal options would have required more money and freedom than she had. People did, however, have a lot of practical advice. Things like, under no circumstances should you get on the plane. Talk to a teacher as soon as possible. If you can't avoid going to the airport, pocket something that'll earn you a private interview with security and tell them you're being trafficked, etc. Again, I don't remember all the specifics, and maybe not all the advice was useful, but some of it was stuff the girl probably needed to read. The comments section got ripped apart by the mods. It was just a graveyard of deleted posts followed by "this comment has been removed because it does not contain any legal advice." And the post itself was removed later with a short note to the effect that "this is not something we can help you with. Have a nice life." I get it. A sub has rules to keep the conversation focused, and you don't want to get in the habit of making exceptions, or the rules no longer mean anything. But those rules are enforced by people, not robots, and sometimes a rule-breaking comment could literally save a life. Have a little empathy. I unsubscribed that day. I hope the girl is okay. The UK one encourages comments like that because a non-lawyer based solution is usually better than going to court. Generally speaking, if lawyers get involved, the situation just gets uglier and more expensive to boot. Op in a post was told by a quality contributor to do something that was actually illegal in Ohio. Op is in Ohio. I also live in Ohio and have a friend who is a cop in Ohio. I told Op not to do what that person advised because it was illegal. I got yelled at by the mods and told that the quality contributor was a police officer in a state 2 states away from Ohio and knew the law. I got called names when I said, but they aren't a cop in Ohio and my friend is. He says it is illegal to do that in Ohio. Apostrophe. I got permabanned from legal advice when the op was complaining about a neighbor on his new lawn having agreement, not on paper with old owner about split well access. And I suggested maybe talking out an agreement with the guy instead of just ignoring his neighbor. And develop a good relationship with him instead of an antagonistic one. Oh, they permabanned me after I gave out information on what is and isn't a HIPAA violation. I was an assistant HIPAA compliance officer for 5 years, but the mod still felt there was no way I could know that much about HIPAA, and I was wrong. They called me names again when I showed them proof that it had been my literal job. From a LPT post I saw earlier, I'm guessing the answer is all of it. As a lawyer, I went on there once to ask a personal legal question. None of us know all areas of law, and the answers I got were so blatantly wrong. It truly blew my mind. And it wasn't a complicated concept people were looking up, literally first year contract stuff people didn't understand. That every contract must have consideration. That's not just Reddit. I have colleagues who will threaten legal action not realizing discovery will absolutely devastate their client's case. A person who committed a minor hit and run was advised to turn themselves in to police and provide a full confession. Absent a confession, there appeared to be little or no evidence against Opus. This advice was heavily upvoted. My observation that this was a really bad idea was deleted by mods as being off topic, generally unhelpful, etc. And yet they claim the mods aren't cops and hand out bans to anyone that says they are. I'm a practicing attorney. I do not read r/legaladvice. I would not respond to r/legaladvice because I could be practicing law without a license in a state in which I'm not licensed, or I could be creating an attorney/client relationship should I respond. Any advice from a lawyer other than you need to seek the advice of a lawyer in good standing with your state bar is probably bad legal advice. This also assumes that legal advice is actually needed. I would be interested to see any case law about anonymous internet advice, and if it can be considered legal advice. The Bar Association takes unauthorized practice of law very seriously. People giving any advice to someone who does not state what jurisdiction they are in. Reading this thread just makes me even more grateful for r/legaladvice. From a friend who browses Reddit but doesn't want an account. He saw a post discussing discovery of child porn on a shared computer and opted not create or download it, and someone basically said it's fine to keep it so long as you never open the file. What the fuck? Question mark? That sub has way too many cops giving advice, and they don't like it when people ask for legal advice when cops are involved. Pretty much all of it. Being an actual lawyer, there is just an invitation to get downvoted and banned. The people there don't want lawyers, they want people to make up laws and tell them what they want to hear. There was one time I told someone who believed that they hadn't actually violated the law to contest their citation for something like reckless acceleration or some other infraction. I added that in a lot of places, particularly larger cities, these traffic type courts are a separate affair from normal court, and that in my experience, mind you, as an actual criminal defense lawyer who has seen it firsthand, that a lot of times tickets get dismissed summarily because the state didn't produce the officer. Not every police union successfully negotiates massive overtime pay for their officers to testify. In my experience, a lot of times it's simply too much work to arrange the scheduling, so they'll drop it instead. This was on top of the fact that he had a credible argument that he wasn't guilty. He was asking if it was even worth it to try, assuming they'd ignore anything he had to say. My advice was literally just that it's worth a shot, and you never know. Maybe you're in a system where the judge won't listen, no matter how innocent you are. Maybe you live in one where the cops don't show up to minor hearing if they aren't already scheduled to be on the clock, and you get a free pee but for no reason. The reaction was really overdramatic, and it became very clear how much of the mod team and quality contributors aren't lawyers, but are police officers. This is important because police officers are not experts on the law, and in fact there are usually very few requirements regarding an officer's requisite knowledge of the law, especially compared to an attorney. As an actual licensed attorney, I can tell you that you should never, under any circumstance whatsoever, ever take legal advice from a police officer. Unfortunately on that sub, that's a lot of what you get, with all the bias and incorrectness that comes with it. This gets me all the time. It feels like it should be borderline immoral or discouraged for a legal advice sub to be run by people who have no reputation or even incentive to give you good legal advice. I saw someone ask for legal advice with custody of their children, who they couldn't provide for but still wanted. Somebody replied with something along the lines of go to a bunch of different random people on the street and offer them money to show up at your court date. Apparently the op took that advice and paid around 30 people a ton of money to show up. Turns out half the people didn't show up, and the other half told the judge about what the mother had paid them to do. The judge was not only going to end up having the children go with the father, but also trace the mother's email address back to her Reddit account where she originally asked for advice. Idiotic move in the first place. I'd love a link to this thread, because I have a hard time believing it. I saw a lawyer tell someone, if they were drunk driving, and got pulled over to have a bottle of vodka in their passenger seat, and when the cop came up to the window, to dump it all over yourself, and start drinking, because the cop won't know if you were drunk before he came up to the window, or if you just became intoxicated at that moment. Lol. It's the same damn charge either way. This way you'd just be guaranteed to get an extra one for open container. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe for more videos.